started. You can start anytime you're ready.
Call the meeting to order. The Oregon City Park and Recreation Advisory Committee. And the time is approximately 7 p.m. April 23rd. Shall we have introductions starting on my right?
Dustin Moyes.
Doug Neely.
Bob Burns.
Joyce Gifford.
Roger Folatice.
Daniel Tupper. And Scott Archer staff.
Okay, next item is the approval of the minutes, February 26, 2015. Has everybody had a chance to review those? Ready for a motion to accept?
I move we accept the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
The minutes are approved. Next item, comments from citizens on issues and items that are not on the agenda. And do we have any citizens that would like to address the Park and Recreation Advisory Committee?
Scott, if I have this right, we're on the agenda, right?
Yes, there is a.
So we're on the agenda.
Yes, so you're speaking about the pickleball item, right?
Yes.
So these looks like everybody that's signed up is on an agenda item. So
Okay.
we'll want to recognize. I'll remind you which one.
Very good, thank you. Item 5, general business. First item under general business, review of our draft annual goals for 2015. And I'm assuming that everybody has had a chance to review those, and now's the time if you want to introduce some new items or to discuss the ones that are on the agenda on the draft. So, any comments?
I think because for a lot of it I might not have been around, there have been goals that have been edited out, and I guess that's, I picked up the edited copy they had there, and I was wondering, is this one under some kind of discussion, I presume?
We met before the meeting in February and had a special meeting to discuss the draft goals, so we have had discussion.
Yeah.
Any comments, Doug? You had a chance to review this?
Yeah, I had a chance to.
On the revised goals, the draft, the word in parentheses, such as after number 3, work with the city on the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, in parentheses says leave. All of those leaves, I think, should be continuation, because I know what you mean by we're leaving them in there, but when it says leave to me, it's also we're exiting.
That's just a note, kind of like an internal discussion note, like we're leaving this on as an item. So the wording is the sentence, and then the parenthesis after that is just it's my comment to you or the feedback I got from the committee. So that won't be in
I like the
final.
word continuation
So
rather than
you
leave.
can propose. So the cleaned up version shows it without that, and if you want to change that
does?
language, then I would suggest you
Where is
make that. So there's an edited version, meaning it just shows all the different comments that in terms of how I received it from the
Okay.
committee. And then there's a cleaned up version. Those should be on as an attachment on your screen.
both of them have that word leave in there, that as far as I can see.
Okay.
Um,
Well, we can certainly clean that up. This is just a draft, and we'll do a final. So if you want to add some other type, like the continuation or whatever, I would suggest you discuss that with the group and see what everybody wants to do, and then I'll make any additional corrections.
Well, I would like for any comments from, especially the lawyers in the group,
How do I
as
get
to
this
the
up here?
wording of those goals.
I can get it.
I'm having trouble getting the goals up on my...
To me, number 13, it's incomplete. Trail connectivity issues. I'm not exactly certain what we're shooting for there. I think it was I know it was a placeholder, but I think that should be fleshed out a little bit.
Choose which one you want.
Which number was that again?
13. I believe, the last one. Or I make that 10. I was looking at the red
Yeah.
line version.
I think maybe it was in response to something I had said at one point that we had a lot of public trails, not necessarily park trails in the city, but I don't think, except if somebody actually lived directly near it, they would not even know they were there. And I know it'd be nice if we had some kind of map to indicate how people can actually walk around this city, and I don't know if that was part of that or not.
Oh, so on the revised goals, that became number 10 instead of number 13?
Correct.
Yeah.
I think that that's a worthy goal, that we need to continue looking at the trail connectivity issues.
I think in terms of, I think it's a worthy goal. It needs to be described a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is where I'm getting.
Investigate trail connectivity issues?
Well, what issues? What are the issues?
Identify and implement.
I had the same problem with several of these comments, that they didn't really explain what it is we're trying to accomplish. And on number 10, I just penciled in identify trail connectivity issues.
I like that wording.
That's what I jotted in on my copy. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Yeah.
That would maybe add prioritize. Once we identify, we prioritize, and then when funding comes along, we can.
Identify and prioritize.
I think this is that particular thing that I was talking about would have to be something that would be done in conjunction with the Public Works Department, because a lot of those are public works, not parks, trails, and so forth. But
Well, you have a different language, Doug? You want to
not
suggest?
well, I think maybe the word identify. I mean, this is something that would be fleshed out, I think, as the time goes on. But I just want to indicate that where my specific interest was on that particular issue.
Is it something more like review and highlight Oregon City trails? And then that's something, I mean, as we focus on those, then it becomes, obviously we would identify some of the connectivity issues, but then it also incorporates any kind of efforts we make as far as identifying them to the public, any kind of mapping we put together. I mean, it's all of those issues kind of rolled into one goal. Maybe the goal needs to be a little bit more broad rather than just the issues, and it's more, you know, because issues will obviously be identified as we
Yeah.
try to bring them to the public.
Okay, you have some language you want to...
Just review and highlight Oregon City trails. 'Cause, I mean, we have them. I mean, there are trails in both the older neighborhood I lived in and the current neighborhood that really no one seems to know about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and other than just the immediate neighbors of the trails themselves. And having, almost like having a set of Oregon City trail walks, or, you know, there's books like, you know, about Portland, about walks in Portland. It's the same thing for Oregon City, you know, whether it's a pamphlet form or whatever it is. But obviously we have to solve some of those connectivity issues or put those together in a more comprehensive form. And obviously that's not going to happen overnight, but maybe that's the goal we should have, is trying to highlight that asset that we have.
Well, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, when you say the word highlight, are you saying promote?
Or promote is another good way to put it, yeah.
And it depends on whether or not we're looking at it from a funding standpoint, because like within transportation system plan or bike ped plan, you know, funding is always an issue. So what they typically do is that they identify trails or routes, and then they prioritize which ones are prioritized in terms of funding. But then if we're also going to promote, you know, to let the public know that they're there, that's also another important part of it.
On that kind of same line of thinking, we also, as a reminder, have an adopted trails master plan that we try to keep at the forefront of these types of discussions. You know, and that ties in with the transportation plan and some things. So we are always kind of looking at those types of things. And just so you know on that, I guess while I'm commenting for just a moment here, it might help you kind of fine-tune your language. Is the staff is always looking at those types of opportunities. We're working with The different, even just within our city, the Public Works Department or different departments, when planning gets like a development application and maybe, some way to work with the developer on connections and so forth. We look at those types of things. We always look at our master plan, our trails plan, and those types of things. So there's always, staff is always looking at this. So, whatever it is that you're trying to pin down there, it would need to be clear to me what you're saying, because we already look for connection opportunities, and we're always trying to fill those links that we know are out there. So,
And but I'm aware that they are there, but I don't think most people are aware that they're there.
That's
It's
true.
a case of getting the information out
Yeah.
there.
Well, I'm not sure where we are.
Let me suggest that before the next meeting, I just kind of write up a little piece in there. It's a couple sentences long, rather than
Good.
take a whole lot of time here. I think we all sense what we're talking about.
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah.
if you want to send that to me in
Yeah, I
advance,
will.
Doug, and then what I'll do for the committee is I will clean this up further, and I'll email that out to you in advance of the next meeting, and hopefully come back with a refined document. I sense that we're pretty close. But I guess before you move off that, I wanted to find out if there are other changes or additions or whatever that you might want to make.
On the goals or just that item?
No, the goals in general.
I have several
Yeah.
comments, but wait my turn.
Mhm.
I thought the language needed to be addressed. I think we have the subject identified in most cases, but it isn't clear what we're trying to accomplish. That's my view on some of these. For example, item number 2, I'm not sure if that's,
RV Master Park?
how do I get this thing down here? Yeah, the RV Master Park, I think it might run into one of the city commission's goals that they're working on, which is the waterfront master plan. And it says to revisit the north end section of the waterfront master plan. If that is talking about the same, if that's talking about the water or the RV park, then our goal is probably not timely. The last meeting we had, Scott, I think you said there was some discussion about making some changes in the RV park.
The commission, one of the subsets of their goals is to review the existing waterfront master plan, which includes the RV park
Yeah.
among other things, in that Clackamas Park, RV park, and the Cove, and all that area.
So my concern is that we adopt a plan that might be ill-timed now, given the work that we saw, the planning documents, and if those are no longer going to happen, then probably this goal is not appropriate.
And I wouldn't say
thought.
that that's not going to happen. We're just going to take a look at the whole thing with the parking and the lot that's for sale that the city owns across the street
Okay.
from Clackamas will have an impact if that does sell. And so that's kind of the idea, is just to take a look at all of that. So the kind of the updated plan for the RV park that we did, the schematic, was to get an idea of what we'd like to do if the park remains there, and if we want to go forward and improve it. So we have something in place that helps us with that, but it'll be part of the discussion. But I wouldn't say it's not going to happen. We just don't know where that whole thing is going to go yet.
Okay.
So
Well, then I guess we can leave it there. I just didn't want us to have a goal that wasn't in line with what the city is planning to do. On this, become informed of the goals and initiatives of the city commission, that probably ought to be either first or last, not in the middle of our goal set. Not a biggie, but I think in just of the way it's formatted. And then item number, I think it's 9. Oops, I lost it again. The one about the open space discussion regarding Newell Creek Canyon. I think that language ought to be tweaked a little bit. And I just tried something in addition to what is here. Support the development of Newell Creek Canyon project. Instead of champion open space discussions regarding Newell Creek Canyon opportunities. So-
See Newell Creek on the.
Yeah, it's number 6.
Next,
Six.
number 6. Yeah.
So I just tried to make it clear to me what we're trying to say there.
It's in conjunction with the Metro Regional Government's one, because that's most of it's owned by the Metro Regional Government.
Right.
And I think, what was your suggestion, Woody?
To support the development of Newell Creek Canyon project.
Support,
So that PrAC would support the development of the Newell Creek Canyon project.
champion, I think, gives us a meaning that we're going to actually be
Well, the
strongly advocating for it. I think it has a greater strength in the wording than support does,
Okay.
personally.
All right, I have some others. On item 10, address general parking and accessibility issues in various parks/events. And I put down an example, the end of the Oregon Trail Park. That's where we've really had the issues, to try to be a little more specific what we're talking about. Then on number 11 of the draft, I had, it says review deferred maintenance and park infrastructure needs. This is a new one, and I put down as an example Latourette Park. Just, I think that's where our discussion started, and then we broadened the discussion to include a lot more, but I like the idea of examples, if that doesn't create a problem.
I think that's a good idea, actually.
Then on number 12, instead of consider deferred maintenance funding solutions, I put down explore. But that's not a biggie either. Then I have a question. How do we do that? If we adopt that as a goal, what is our role? How do we explore the funding solutions?
Well, I think on that one, that's something that we've been working on and we've been talking about for a few years, and I think that'd probably be a continued discussion with the staff, that I would bring ideas, or we would continue to talk about that. I think the idea was, my recollection was that the committee would like to be in a position to be able to support those types of things. So I think we need to continue just to. I think explore is a good idea, and and eventually, hopefully, you would support something. And
We talked about the trail issues. Then I had a couple of others that I thought might be important for us. One, it says, begin the process for naming of our new parks. We had some discussion at one of our meetings about our role and how we should be involved. Perhaps that ought to be one of our goals for the year. Another one I mentioned earlier, initiates a smoking ban in all of Oregon City parks. I'm sure that'll be a low-key issue. Well, those are my ideas.
We differentiate between tobacco and marijuana with the new laws. All the above.
I see that's happening all over the state.
Yeah.
The state of Oregon parks and beaches and a lot of the cities have already adopted such regulations. So
on that last one, do we want to say, because you're saying initiate a ban, that suggests that we've already kind of decided that and are moving towards an implementation or something, something more along the exploratory line, or I don't want to put words. It's your proposal, Bob. I'm just trying to help get it to where we can manage
About
to
consider a ban.
We can give recommendations, right? But it really
yeah.
is a law enforcement issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's something that would go through the city commission in any case, but
Oh, yeah, we'd have to
personally, I
recommend.
think,
We could recommend a ban.
yeah. We What currently do we not permit in parks?
Except for by special permission, alcohol,
So
and
I
of
would-
course drug. You know, I mean,
I mean,
anything illegal.
I think we're talking about our controlled substances, and I think they shouldn't be used in the public parks.
We're trying to promote a healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
Part of our role. Well, those are my quick ideas.
I would like to comment on number 6, going back to Newell Creek Canyon. I do agree with the idea of championing, but in my mind, that presumes that there are some somewhat controversial things being worked on, and so, it might be for our committee, the best would be to say, participate or be engaged in discussions, and each of us have that opportunity to be part of the I'm on the stakeholder committee, but there are open house, public hearings and so forth that we should all be a part of and give our perspective from the city. And I don't know, Scott, if you're involved at a higher level in those discussions with Dave Elkin and others.
Yes.
But so I think there are some issues, particularly with bicycle paths or bicycle trails versus hiking trails, and it's clear to me this becoming a little more political. There are things going on behind the scenes that those kinds of things I don't know that I want to champion if I don't agree with what is being decided. But anyway, but I'm definitely engaged and supportive with whatever decision comes out. I definitely support that decision. So the Metro makes, but it certainly is in Metro's. The ball's in Metro's lap. They really are.
Why not make it just actually as a function of our bodies to participate in these, in those, and actually be an active participant in the process? Maybe that's the best way to deal with it.
Yeah.
Other comments? Scott's capturing all these comments.
I hope.
for us.
I have a question. I put a proposal in for to just discuss art in the park and how we deal with it, and I think it was moved to an agenda versus a goal, but I don't see it in the agendas either.
It's up to the committee which way you'd prefer. It just didn't make it on this agenda, but I do recall that discussion, Roger. So if the committee wanted to put it on a goal, or if you just want to include it as a future agenda item, I think that's, as of now, that's what I was planning to do, but
Oh, okay,
just for a night that we had a little bit lighter agenda than this.
right.
Okay, maybe we can put that on the May agenda,
What do
perhaps.
you prefer on the May
That's
agenda?
fine with me.
Okay, Roger. Okay, other comments on our annual goals? And it looks like Scott's going to have another version for us to look at the May meeting, and hopefully we can be in a position to make an adoption.
Great.
Okay, let's move on to 5B.
Oh, yes, thanks. Tom O'Brien signed up to speak on this agenda item, so if
Okay,
you
Tom.
Thanks, Tom, sorry.
A very appropriate time. Appreciate the opportunity to talk. We had our neighborhood association meeting last Thursday, and while this does not impact this particular point, there's no other place, and I didn't want to bring it up in citizen comments, but two people individually brought up the fact that they're very, very pleased with the maintenance that is occurring in Filbert Run Park. They're really, really happy that the city has taken a strong interest in taking over the maintenance of that park from the neighborhood. Relative to this particular agenda item, I would like you to ask you to consider, and I don't know if it's goal 9 or it's goal 4, on what I printed out before coming to the meeting tonight. It was goal 9, but it appears that on your screens it's goal 6. I would like to see you add something relative to explore the pursuit of grants on behalf of Filbert Run and Glen Oak Parks. I think that those people in those neighborhoods, a large number of whom have paid system development charges to support the parks of the city, deserve consideration at least equal to supporting efforts on the part of Metro in the Newell Creek Canyon. Not that I don't support what the Metro is doing, I don't know enough yet about what direction they're moving, but I think we have an obligation as a city to support those taxpayers who have contributed funds to support our parks. And as such, I would like to see both of those parks trying at least to move forward. One way in which to do that is to explore the opportunity for grants to help bring those two parks into existence. So I appreciate consideration of adding that to your goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
And it sounds like he wants to include probably in the wording in one way or another the Kanema Park open space as well. So maybe that wording, to accommodate that, maybe the specific wording needs to be put in there.
And I'm sure Scott can come up with something that is appropriate, just I think it needs to be added to your list of goals. You have a lot of good goals here, but that's one more that perhaps could be put on there, if it's your desire.
Any comments on Tom's suggestion? Sounds good. Do you have some language you can crank out for
I
us,
do,
Scott?
yeah. If that's
Okay.
is that the wish of the committee to add
Sure.
that, or?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
It's a case of their use and finding funding to make those uses
Yes.
available. Right.
Yeah. Sounds good. Okay, then let's move on to the next item, and it's our annual report to the City Commission. I think that time is coming up shortly. Do we have a time scheduled yet, Scott, for that?
There's no specific time. The commission requests an annual report from each of its boards and committees. So I know you did that last spring, I believe. So it seems like we've done that in somewhere April, May. Has kind of been the thing for the last few years. But it's up to the committee. And typically the board chair will give the report and maybe ask if any other members would go along, but I can work with you on that. The commission meetings are the first and third Wednesday of every month, and so it's just a matter of choosing one that works for the chair or whoever's going to speak, and I'll work with our city recorder's office to get that on an agenda. So
Probably should be after we adopt our annual goals, so we can have that as part of the report. And if we make the final adoption in our May 28th meeting, then sometime in June might be an appropriate time to make a report to the
Okay.
City Commission. That sound okay? Okay, then let's move on to the next item, and that's Glen Oak Road and Filbert Run Parks Master Plan Process Update.
Could I ask one question? My brain works slower than the agenda. So, on the grant, is that something that the city has someone on staff that can write grants, or is that something we have to identify someone on our committee that would take the bull by the horns, so to speak?
no, that would be a staff function. But in the past, the Parks and Rec Committee has supported development of parks as we've moved those forward. So with part of the function of what PRAC does is helps us to identify priorities of which projects to move forward. So that's kind of how that works. And then we, and it's not just a PRAC recommendation, but that certainly weighs into the decision-making process. And then but staff does the grant writing. We don't have a grant writer, but it's myself or one of my staff that do grants for our department. We've been
extremely successful at it. So
Yeah, pretty-
I think on the
brag, but
thanks.
on the question of both the Newell Creek Canyon and the Kanema open spaces, those are, of course, Metro
Right.
properties, but we would be doing that in conjunction, I think, with any entity that we're involved with, but we don't necessarily own the property.
That's correct. Yeah, the Metro-owned properties, we don't really have a lot to do with the funding of any development, but we definitely play a role in the input and support and so forth. So yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Scott?
Let's see, just
Van Oak Road, Filbert Run.
yeah, this is just a kind of a standing update while we continue to move through the master plan process for the two parks. Not any huge update for you, but just to let you know that the preferred options for both parks remain the same as they were last presented to PrAC, so those have not changed. We are kind of working our way through figuring out what exactly we need to do with the land use process to have these adopted. We have discovered recently that we may not have to do as much as we had initially thought to get these plans adopted, and that we probably don't have to have the site plan fully adopted until the time that we go forward with our development. But we've got basically we've had your committee has recommended those two site plans as they exist, and then we will be presenting these at a commission work session, the City Commission work session on May 12th. We are scheduled to present essentially the same presentation that you received at a recent meeting, where we go through and kind of talk about a recap of the public input process and the design process and how we came about with the preferred option on each of those and present those. And so we'll do that with the commission to see if they have any questions, concerns, other input, and kind of pending that, we'll have basically arrived at a preferred plan that we're going to move forward with, and then it's a matter of kind of dealing with when do we go forth in development. And again, I'll continue to remind this committee and our city commission and anywhere I can do so, in as much as I very much want to build those parks for our community. I want to also be very cautious about doing so until we're ready to take care of them. We've talked about maintenance quite a bit, and we're already stretched. Our resources are stretched, so we're going to want to approach that carefully, because we want to build a park that we can maintain. That's going to be a high expectation of the community, obviously. So we'll continue to decide how, and that plays back into some of the discussion that you had a little bit ago with your goals as far as supporting some maintenance recommendations that may come forward here, and we've already talked about some of those, and we'll continue to do so. So anyway, I've always got to get that little plug in, just to remind everybody that we want to make sure we can take care of anything that we build. So that's
Okay.
it on that.
Very good. Let's move on to 5D, Willamette Falls Legacy Project, standing update.
And again, a pretty brief update. This is just a standing item that you've asked to keep in front of you at each of your meetings. The latest that I can tell you, the most significant thing I can let you know, is that the selection process for the design of the Riverwalk is moving forward. We've talked about this before, so I won't recap that, but the Riverwalk is going to be the first major development in that in the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, and there's been an advertisement for qualified firms to submit that they would like to do the project design, and there was an excellent response to that. Essentially, as it's described to me, we've received what we would kind of consider to be firms and design teams that have done world-class projects, and that's what the Partners Group has been shooting for. So really good response to the advertisement. It's been narrowed down to 3 proposers, and there's a technical committee that will be reviewing further and interviewing further, and then making a decision and a recommendation. So that's going to be taking place over the next month or so, and the hope is that there will be a firm hired probably sometime in the month of June. And then, as I've told the Parks Committee, there's going to be lots of opportunities for input, public process in the design of the Riverwalk, and I'll keep you apprised of all that, and there'll be opportunities for this committee certainly to have input.
Great. Any comments or questions for Scott on that item? Let's go on to 5E, report on the Ermitinger House project.
So again, this
So
is
have
just,
we found a buyer?
No. Would you like to buy it, sir? So just, again, just a standing update on the project. The renovation process is nearing completion. We're on the home stretch, probably within a few weeks. Seems like every time we think we're about ready to be done, there's another little thing that we've discovered that we kind of need to deal with. But we're very close to wrapping up the renovation piece. I think we've talked a little bit here, but not extensively about this next part, which is the sort of the programming aspect. So once we've completed the restoration and the renovation of the facility, the city will need to decide exactly what it wants to do, how it's going to operate the house. And what we've been able to do, we received a grant from the State Historical Preservation Office, SHPO, and they gave us, without any competitive grant process, they just said, "Here's, because you're a certified historical community, they gave us a grant to go and hire a consultant to help us do what we're calling, in essence, a programming study." So it's a consultant with heritage planning expertise. The person that's working on this for us is actually a member of the same firm that did the architectural design, which specializes in historical architecture and preservation and renovation. So that has been something that we've been working on for the last several weeks. We've been meeting with both kind of individual groups, as well as we had a kind of a broad heritage committee meeting. We have a couple of members, Dan and Roger, right? Was that the two of you? Yeah.
Correct.
We're representatives of PRAC at that meeting a couple of weeks ago, I believe. And I don't know if you have any comments to that effect.
It was a really interesting and enjoyable meeting. I see some of the other members of the group are here tonight. I know Roger can jump in at any point, but it was a good discussion. And what I found actually particularly enlightening is kind of this effort to create this larger overall kind of integration of historic properties across Oregon City, and kind of an experience about the history of the area, with Ermatinger as a component of that. And that was actually a really good discussion that we had. So I'm really glad I participated. It was good. So
Excellent.
Very encouraging as well.
I don't recall that there was ever anything considered as far as tying everything together. How to go about it. Somebody brought up the fact that we needed a group that would form to bring it together. And but I don't know whether that was let's see, the business end of it, the business group downtown, or
I think it was just the different historical groups together.
right.
Just talking about kind of comparing notes about the different efforts they had made at bringing programming to Oregon City, and the efforts they'd made, and some of the challenges that they had faced also with bringing that programming in, both with getting attendance and then also with just maintaining the economic viability of it. But it was viewed more as a challenge to be surmounted rather than something that was just like a cliff that had to be faced. So that was always encouraging. I mean, there's definitely the spirit in town to actually make this work, and that found that very encouraging.
So this programming study, then, what will be the outcome is that the consultant that's working on that for us is as a part of that, so studying our local community, studying specifics about the operations of the Ermatinger House, but also he has gone out and done some case studies with some other house museums, historic house museums, mostly on the West Coast, some, I think, Washington, Oregon, California, to try to find some sort of similar type examples and incorporate some case studies into the discussion. And what will be presented to us at the end of this is a report that has some potential solutions, recommendations, ideas, and considerations. That report then will be shared with the Parks and Rec Committee, with the different interest groups and folks that want to see that, and then also with our City Commission to have a discussion going forward as to what it is that we would plan to do. So there'll be more coming on that one.
Sounds like it'd be a great resource for our school district. If there's a final product, it would be appropriate for the school district. All the historical information being gathered.
So we have a citizen/city commissioner, I think, that wants to speak to you on this topic, if you will. Whichever hat you're wearing.
Good evening,
Hi,
Commissioner Smith.
Rocky Smith, Oregon City resident. One of the things, and this is not specific to Ermatinger, but Roger and Daniel were at the meeting that we talked about with the heritage groups. I've been to many tourism meetings in the past years, and one of the things that I think ties with Ermatinger House, but also Willamette Falls Project, and for that matter, End of the Oregon Trail Interpretive Center. I think as we move forward in Oregon City with things like the Willamette Falls Project, trails, all these things, that I worried a little bit that we don't continue to compartmentalize parks and tourism and economic development, because it's all the same thing. And one of the things that I think that we need to have a dialogue about as an entire community is how those all work together as we move forward. Because the Ermatinger House is a great example. The End of the Oregon Trail building is a great example of something that's in the Parks Department that is not, in reality, a priority in dealing with maintenance of all of our parks and staffing and everything else. And how do we keep maintaining those facilities, but also how do we move forward with projects like Willamette Falls, where some of these projects have definitely a tourism connection, definitely a heritage connection. How does Parks and Rec Advisory and all these other groups kind of work together to make sure that we're all having that same dialogue? It's a community-wide dialogue that I think we need to be having. So I don't know if that means that we have some work sessions or something, but I really was interested in hearing from you two at that last meeting, even though that wasn't necessarily the focus. How we do that, and I think a lot of people are kind of having this same conversation community-wide, and I'm a little frustrated at some meetings, just as a citizen, but also in some cases as a commissioner. It's a lot of us going to the same meetings and a lot of us talking about the same things, but none of us have been able to solve the problem within each of these compartments. And how do we bring them all together? Because if we don't, we're going to have some, real problems. And I think if we succeed in bringing all these things together and figuring out how they all intertwine, no one else is going to be able to touch what this community has to offer. So I hope that we all continue to have that dialogue and try to work together to try to figure out how those all mix together. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if I could comment too, this is kind of hitting a nerve with me. I sit on the Clackamas County Tourism Marketing Committee, and then it was part of the TAC, and then part of the Clackamas County Bike Ped Committee, Advisory Committee, several different committees. And then I talked to so many people who are individual operators. They're in the tourism business or running organizations. And my perception is that you have dozens of organizations and multiple dozens of people who are all interested in tourism. And, Rob Campbell, who is part of the Small Business Development Center, he was talking to the Oregon City Business Alliance and said, what's it going to be like when Oregon City has 500,000 plus people per year coming to the falls? And it's going to change our city. And so you see all of these people working on economic development, on planning, on parks, on, and all relates to tourism, but there's nobody that's really kind of coordinating all of that. And so that's a little bit of I share your concern and just wish there was some kind of an advisory committee that just focused on tourism that could, kind of weave everything together and get a kind of a comprehensive plan.
Was that something that's being looked at by the city commission? I mean, is there, as we're moving forward and trying to move into this larger scale of a tourism center, is that a goal that's been brought before the city commission to actually, whether it's a committee or whether it's a specific position of a tourism czar, for whatever you would want to call the position, or somebody that then coordinates? Really what we're talking about is a multidisciplinary approach to trying to coordinate all of these different things going on. And I don't know. I mean, have we heard anything like that?
Well, I can't speak for the city commission, but just as staff person, it's not an adopted goal, but I can't speak for whether that's something that is in the thoughts of in any of the commission or whatever. But it is not. It didn't make the next 2-year goal list. So.
Well, when the tsunami comes, and that's probably overstating it, but when it does happen, hopefully it goes slow, but it could happen quickly. And how does the Ermitinger House and all of the other heritage homes, how do they tie in? And what, is there going to be a coordinated plan that when people come there that we can say, hey, there's all these other things going on in our city, and so it's just some kind of a coordinated plan that all of the different players, and they're all enthusiastic. You have Sam Driva with Energy Kayaking, you have the EOTIC, you have the Bike Concierge. I mean, they're all working to get farm tours and all these other things going on, winery tours, and so you've got all these very excited people about contributing to tourism. But yet everybody's kind of working in their little private silos, and every once in a while we kind of connect and go, hey, we should do this and we should do that. Maybe you should talk to so-and-so. But it just seems like there should be a tourism plan, I guess, that does some kind of coordination.
Well,
Had years and years ago, I went to Bergen, Norway, and in the middle of their main street there was a kiosk where they had people that you went to and you wanted to see something. They could refer you to where you could go, where you could see things. I would guess that we're going to be the kind of place that could use one of those things, that we have some real coordinated effort as people coming through. And I think it's something we ought to look at.
Yeah.
It's something that's very accessible.
Yep.
It seems like they're not all run by the same agencies, which is kind of an issue too. We have the state, federal. Where is that? John McLaughlin is federal, isn't it? And Ermitinger, and what is Ermitinger state, or is that that's
City.
part
Yeah, it's a
city?
city.
So and then the end of the trail, which is county, right?
No, that's actually the city owned, and then there's a county.
I'm sorry.
But you're onto something though, because the county through the state tourism money operates the visitor center. But we still own the site, and so it's all kind of a multi-jurisdictional issue. The Museum of the Oregon Territory is owned by the county, operated by the Clackamas Historical Society. So yeah, that's your point is.
But we have Metro coming in as part of the group for the falls with the state, and in the city, that whole group there, that combination, and the county. It seems like something could be done with that whole. With those or I don't know, they're not agencies, but those departments to form some kind of a tourism so that the city wouldn't have to do it. And I don't know how to.
overwhelming. We have the Chamber of Commerce, we have Metro, we have the county government with various subcommittees that they have. Our city has several committees, PRAC being one.
Heritage groups.
The Heritage Group. It would be nice to have an overarching coordination committee of some kind. I don't know how that happens, but you can certainly see a need for that.
Well, we have several federal sites, isn't the Rose
Rose Farm?
Isn't that have a?
That's
Okay, I'm sorry, again.
Part of the McLaughlin,
All right.
It's a private.
M&A.
It's a private,
I thought they had a ranger that showed up for that.
What-
Okay, thank you.
Well, and you know, most of you probably don't know, but you know, the Clackamas County tourism, the marketing, they are aggressively marketing Clackamas County, but you know, I would argue that most of that has to do with Oregon City. They're aggressively marketing that to Texas, and in particular Austin, because they kind of think that that's a good market for us, a good match for us. And so, you know, it's just kind of a Twilight Zone thing for me to think of being marketed elsewhere in the United States, and locally we don't really even know about that, or we're not really coordinated, I guess. So.
Well, so move on to another agenda item. Now we've resolved all the issues there.
The elephant remains in the room.
Let's move on to 5F, an easy issue to deal with, the pickleball group request. And Scott, do you have any comments to lead off our discussion? I know we have people here to talk to address the committee.
Yeah, I think you've got a couple different things here as far as this item. The last meeting you had, you asked that we have a follow-up discussion, or we put this on the next agenda, which we missed last month, so that ended up being a couple months. So it's been a little bit since we discussed this. But specifically, the committee asked to follow up on this discussion. You had the pickleball organization came and spoke to you at least one or a couple of occasions, and I think there were some discussion about that, and so you asked that I bring this back to you, and also give some recommendations from staff as to the specifics of the facilities that had been discussed. So I'm prepared to talk about that a little bit, and then you've also got some of the folks here tonight who came to speak. I don't know that they knew that this was an agenda item, but I think because I was contacted in advance just to say, hey, we'd like to come and just kind of speak to the committee again under, citizen comments. So just so happened that we put this on the agenda. So whichever way the committee would like to take this, if you want to hear from the folks from the organization first, or if you want my comments and your discussion,
I think we should hear from the guests first, and then have you summarize for us, Scott, if that's okay. Is that all right?
So for those of you that had filled out a card and wanted to speak, you can go ahead and just come up, and if you reintroduce yourself as you do so.
Oh, she's got a paddle.
That's how things get done.
That's right.
I brought a ball and thank you. So my name's Rita Maynard, and I'm an Oregon City community resident. And so I want to thank you for putting us on the agenda. That was a bit of a surprise. But we wanted to follow up on the last time we were here. And so the last time we were here, we presented what pickleball is about, the actual sport of it. And we requested that we have more of that in the community. And hopefully there have been some other people. We've been the face of pickleball for this committee, but there's many other residents in the community who would like to play. And a few of them might have emailed you, Scott, so I've sort of encouraged them if they've wanted to do that. So just because we're the face of it, we're not the only ones there. So following up on where we left it last time, it seemed that Scott suggested that we study the use. We were looking at Rivercrest Park. That is a park that has tennis courts in good shape, and we wanted to make them multi-use courts so that we could put pickleball in with the tennis courts as well. And so we can explain how you do that if you have questions about that. But Scott proposed that so I wanted to say two things. So I wanted to follow up on last time, Scott's proposal to study it, and also a proposal that we want to present today. So in following up about studying it, Pat Irish, a resident of Oregon City, lives right there at Rivercrest Park, right near in that community, and he's also an avid pickleball player. So I'll turn it over to him because he has some good information about the utilization of that park.
Great, thank you. This sitting in front of the panel kind of reminds me of the last time I sat in front of the panel. It was the parole hearing, but this feels a little bit more comfortable. That's a joke. Yeah, I live on Harding Boulevard, which you may or may not know borders Rivercrest, and I've lived there for 7 years. And I've been all over that park. I see it daily, of course, coming to and from home. And I've sort of adopted this 13-acre park as my front yard, and fortunately somebody mows and maintains it, so that's the sweet part about it. But I'm real proud of Rivercrest, and I think the city should be too. They got a beautiful new restroom, well lit, it's well maintained. The covered shelters are used considerably. The basketball courts are pretty active, but the tennis courts just seem like there's just not a lot of use, which I would expect there to be. And it would seem that we should make more use of those tennis courts by by putting pickleball courts on them, and therefore we've got dual use of them.
And did you, I think when I talked to you, you said you actually taped some courts and played with friends, so.
Can I admit that?
I don't know. Well, tape comes off.
No,
so I think
yeah.
you can admit that,
Yeah.
because if nobody has noticed that there had been taped, then the tape is a temporary
That's true.
solution.
I'll admit that. A number of times, some friends and I have gone over to the courts, and we use the net for the tennis court, but we take just like painter's tape and make the court dimensions for the pickleball court and play. Nobody there, so we're playing pickleball, and then when we're done, of course, we pull the tape up and we're out of there. But it's a beautiful court, and it'd be a perfect use for dual use for tennis and pickleball.
So the next part, so this is the study part. So Pat's the person that has some information about how the park's been utilized. And so the next part is a proposal, a 90-day proposal experiment that would have us be able to tape the courts and see how that goes. I don't know what the objection to doing anything about making this a multi-purpose court is. If indeed we had our 90-day experiment and horrendous things happened, we'll take our paddles, we'll take our tape, we'll take our balls, we'll leave. We don't want bad things to happen in our community as well. If it's successful, we'd like to paint them so that they can actually stay and we can use them regularly. Now, as far as how this would happen, Tom would be the fellow to talk to that. Yes.
You haven't had any complaints from the neighbors about drunken carousing parties, the pickleball parties, right?
We are a rowdy. I think you should be concerned about us. We're mostly seniors. We are a rowdy bunch.
Rowdy bunch. So there haven't been really any complaints from excessive noise or disturbance from the neighbors, I would assume. You've been doing it for a time there, haven't you?
Well, we do it in other communities, no, because there aren't in place. There's no place to play in
It's not really
Oregon
used
City.
as pickleball. It's just
We
the
can't
guys
play.
like me
Okay.
that go there and do it temporarily. It gets a little pickleball use at Rivercrest.
And is that lighted, night lighting?
No.
Okay.
So, but the idea would be that there isn't any place to play pickleball in Oregon City. So we go to Tualatin, we go to Wilsonville, we go to indoor court at Eastmoreland Racket Club, but there's nothing in Oregon City.
Well, and but that brings up another point. I mean, here we have Wilsonville and Tualatin and Beaverton and all these places that are catching on to this fast-growing sport. And I'd hate to see Oregon City just be kind of the weak little sister that, oh yeah, Oregon City, they don't bother with that. And I think we need to keep up with the times.
And so that's why we're proposing it. We're residents. We live here. We want to play here. We don't want to travel all the time to play. And we want, while we were able to be part of the Glen Oaks Park discussion, we can't wait the years that it's going to take, potentially, for other courts to be built, and we'd like something immediately now. So there's generous offers for it to be at no cost to Oregon City. So I'll turn it over to Tom, who can talk more about that.
Since we last visited with you.
Could we ask that you would go up to the speaker's podium because it needs to be picked up on the audio and videotape. Thanks very much.
Hi, thanks for letting us come back and visit with you. I'm Tom Whidden, and I am the district ambassador for the USA Pickleball Association. We have over 1 million members now, and we're growing at the rate of about 5% a month. So it's a huge social phenomena that's going on across the United States. It's pretty easy to understand why. look at our population shift as all becoming senior citizens, empty nester baby boomers. We're arriving at our retirement age in pretty good physical health, but chasing a tennis ball, even if you can, you don't want to, and got a few bandages on your elbows, and knees, and shoulders, and stents and hip replacements, but you can still play pickleball well into your 80s, and they do. Retirement communities in Arizona, Florida, California. I was down at Coachella Valley in Indio, and they're ripping out tennis courts right, left, and center and redoing them as pickleballs because that's just where it's going. We have discussions underway right now with merging the U.S. Pickleball Association as a part of the U.S. Tennis Association. That's a really big story, but it helps to demonstrate the population shift and what's going on with tennis in general. It was popular back in the Arthur Ashe days and that sort of thing, and there's well over 100 tennis courts languishing around Portland. Probably the best article I've seen written in a long time is in your packet, and it was in the Oregonian yesterday, and it kind of tells it like it is, that a few places get protected and are quasi-funded by the City of Portland Park and Rec Department as a little private tennis bastion that you sign up and you pay a membership and an enrollment fee to get in at the Portland Tennis Center and a few other places, and the rest of the places just go to heck. Broken glass and skateboarders and dangling nets. I travel all over this city doing Comcast equipment recovery, and it's just a crying shame. Well, you have to say, well, maybe not here in Oregon City. Take a stroll down to La Tourette Park and over there by the jail, and you see you are following the same path of destruction that's going on all over the city, and not just in Portland, all over the United States. And the one thing that's turning that trend around is pickleball. And we come well funded. Most of our members are seniors, and probably, like a lot of you, probably been saving 401k and IRA money. We got some bucks, and we're willing to spend them to do what's necessary so we can have some fun. And this is what we've done at Tualatin Community Park, at Juergens Park, at Wilsonville. We just gave a presentation this week at Newburgh for the Chehalen Park and Rec Department, and as they rip out the swimming pool, we're going to build a pickleball complex there, plus redo the 4 tennis courts they have at Jackwith Park. And this story just goes on and on all over Oregon. The park's being redone by pickleball with money raised by the groups, and this is what we're proposing to you. With no money out of the pocket of the city, we'll come and build a field of dreams by striking those tennis courts over at Rivercrest. We'll prove ourselves and then go permanent with paint once we've had a chance to build up our membership. You don't just put down a set of stripes and 20 cars show up. You've got to put it on the agenda. And I've put here our list and our Facebook page, and we start announcing it. This Sunday, come on over, have some watermelon in the park and play pickleball, and it builds. So we're going in the springtime. When Wilsonville started, they had nothing. A couple of guys out there with a little Gorilla Tape. Well, now they're building 8 pickleball courts there. We're redoing the tennis courts there to add 4 more surfaces, and we converted an old basketball practice facility into 2 permanent dedicated fenced pickleballs. Now that's all happened in with the past year. At the Summerfield Retirement Center, we gave a presentation in July. They're now resurfacing their tennis courts and turning those into 4 pickleball courts. So the trend is repeating itself over and over. And I think we deserve to give the people of Oregon City a chance to start having some fun over here. We haven't had a setback or reversal any one of the venues we've tried. They just keep growing and growing and growing. We have over 1,000 club members in the Columbia River Pickleball Club and the Tualatin Pickleball Club, and now Wilsonville is forming their own club. And some people belong to all 3 clubs. So I guess what we're here to get a yes from you. What do you got to lose? Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, Scott, comments
Sure.
from staff?
Do you want to step up to the mic there?
How many of you have played or seen pickleball in action?
I guess that's a pickleball, and I've seen balls like
No, I
that
mean on the
before, but
court.
that I've never seen.
Have you ever
what it
seen
was.
played?
I looked it up on YouTube, and there's some good, there's some good things on there. It looked like fun.
Does it look?
Yeah, it looked like fun.
Interesting.
I could do it,
I'm sure you
even with
could.
my bad eyesight. Tennis, they go too fast. So.
Good, thank you.
Do you want me to
Comments from
Sure.
staff, Scott? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so that's a tough act to follow. You guys are very, very convincing and compelling. You do a good job of representing your interests.
It's a pretty good price.
Free's good. So in all, I didn't. You asked the committee, but I would have raised my hand too. I've played pickleball, so I'll start by saying I think pickleball is a great activity, and if there's an interest, it certainly is something that I would love to see made available and promoted and that kind of thing. So that's where I'm coming from. But I also, as the person who administers the department, I've got to look at all the different factors. So since we've talked about this over the last few months and kind of trying to formulate some thoughts or recommendations or ideas for consideration and consideration for what these folks have proposed. There's let's see. So we have 4 parks that have tennis courts. We have Rivercrest, which are the ones that were renovated a few years ago. Far and above, that's our best tennis courts. We have two courts side by side. One's a singles only, and one's a doubles singles court. Those were completely renovated about 4 or 5 years ago now. I can't remember. I think it was around that time. And then we have Hillendale, which I would call mediocre condition. And then we've got 2 other parks that I would say the tennis courts are in deplorable condition. That is La Tourette, DC La Tourette, right up the hill. We stopped there on our parks tour last summer that we did with the park committee. And then Hartke Park, I think, or Hazelwood. Hartke. So up. Go ahead, Blaine.
What's there's a tennis court kind of down in a hollow. Is that?
It's lot.
That's La Tourette.
Okay, yeah.
That's the one just up the hill on
Right, the swim pool.
What is it, about 9th or something? Yeah, the old swimming pool. Yeah. So just as a little reference point and information for the committee. So we've got 4 sites, and then I kind of just told you about the different conditions of the courts. Then in addition, I think it's good to just think about the whole community. We've got quite a few relatively new courts at the high school that are, when not being used for school activities, are open to the public, so maybe late evenings and weekends, but not all the time. And then Clackamas Community College has several courts too, which I believe are still mostly open to the public and not in great condition. And you guys did an event over there, right?
Right, but Clackamas isn't striped, so there's nothing, at the community college, there weren't stripes, we take them.
Yeah.
And at the high school, they have lessons during the week, so not only can we no longer go during the day, which is what seniors want to do, is play during the day, we can't go to the high school during the day, and if they have lessons until 6, and it's been getting dark, so like we had not been able to use the high school facilities.
Yeah, so limited use at the high school. So anyway, that's just a perspective on what we've kind of got. But as the city goes, we have those four sites that I mentioned, and at each of those, the most we have is 2 courts, and some of them we just have basically kind of roughly 1. So one of the considerations with the specific request coming from the pickleball organization is that we make some changes at Rivercrest Park. As the staff person who's in charge of the parks, I have to look at that with some caution because simply because we need to consider all the different uses and impacts. One of the Mr. Irish, right? You're the neighbor of the park. Okay. So I appreciate your observations, and I believe what you're saying is true. I also have heard and also have my own observations that there are times that I go by, there are people that I hear from, or my staff report to me, that there are times where the courts are used, and it may not be extensive at times, but maybe it kind of ebbs and flows. We also do we do summer lessons there that we use the courts at times, but there are times when I would contend that the courts are fairly well used. The basketball court next to it is pretty well used during nicer weather times. So I wouldn't just say that it's not used or underutilized completely. I would say that without any scientific, I'm not going to give you numbers, and I don't have the ability to go out and track it, but I know that they are used. But bigger, kind of the broader concern is that what I've, as you know, the committee, I believe, knows, over the last several years, we've made a number of really nice improvements at Rivercrest Park. We've had the good fortune to get the courts redone with the grant. We've done the restroom. Thanks for acknowledging that. We're very proud of that restroom building. We put in the spray park a few years back. That was about the same time we did the courts. We did the new shelter right next to the spray park, and we've made a few other kind of little improvements here and there, but those are kind of the big ones. Every time we do a park improvement, we go to the neighborhood association. We converse with them before we go in and do that. And the one thing that we started hearing from the Rivercrest Neighborhood Association, now this may not represent everybody, but from the official neighborhood association, the comments that I heard and the conversation in the meetings that I went to was that they appreciate the improvements, but kind of like towards the end there, the restroom was the last one that we completed. What I heard pretty strongly from the neighborhood representatives were, okay, now it's time to go and do some activities at another park because there's a lot of people coming here. The spray park really kind of put the numbers up pretty high. The attendance at that park really went up with the spray park, and that was a pretty significant impact. And so the neighborhood said, would you really kind of consider not adding new activities for a good while? Because I think also what triggered that discussion was the high school group came a few years ago and said, can we put in the sand volleyball court that we want to build at Rivercrest? It's great. It is a wonderful park, and it's well utilized. And the neighborhood, they came to the neighborhood association, but I attended that meeting, and the neighborhood association said, could you put that at another park? We feel like we're kind of getting over-programmed here.
They came to this body
Thank
and
you.
urged us to make sure it didn't go in there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's correct. So I just want to give you the entire picture here that that these are considerations and issues that I've heard. Now, use of a public court and a public facility. Public is the key word. There is nothing stopping anybody, the activity that you mentioned, so long as no permanent markings were made and nothing was done to damage anything. What you did was just great and fine. It's in the public record. We're on TV and everything. So it's as good or better than writing. So, as long as you don't do anything to a park that causes any kind of permanent alteration or damage or whatever, you can go do the same thing on the basketball court. You might get, some kids might think to tell you what they think about that or something. But the intended use is kind of the consideration. And then if you go and just show up and use a park for different types of recreational activities, there's really not anything per se preventing you. We don't put up a sign that says, absolutely don't do anything besides play tennis here. We do try to encourage not doing, skating and skateboarding and rollerblading stuff because that scuffs up and marks the courts. But other than that, we haven't really ever had the reason to go in and tell folks that I know of not to do other activities. Blaine?
What is the, if I'm a homeowner there, I could definitely see a concern about having high schoolers there. Nothing against high schoolers. Most of them are great, but, just the kind of stereotype would be they're playing volleyball would be kind of, it's an unknown. But now you have middle and older seniors, and that seems to be a different demographic involved in that. But I guess what's the issue with the neighborhood? Do you know? Is it parking?
It's parking and just impacts with, it kind of flows out into the neighborhood. So here's what it really is, Blaine. It's not the demographic at all that as it was explained to me. Now the volleyball court thing, I don't recall the specifics of that other than just there's a lot of impact. Can we think about another site, which we ended up doing at Hillendale, and it's worked great.
Okay. Good.
When we put in the spray park, it pretty dramatically increased the usage. A lot of parking overflows into the neighborhood, and again, this is not absolutely representative of every neighbor, but just I'm speaking from the specific feedback that I received, or that our department received from the neighborhood association, which is kind of supposed to be the umbrella group that represents the neighborhood. That's the way it's in theory supposed to work. So it wasn't really the demographic issue, wasn't really that. It was just more about the impact of a lot of people, a lot of cars, a lot of and sometimes that kind of bleeds a little bit into the evening hours when maybe people are trying to kind of have a little bit of quiet. But it's a park, and you live by a park, so there's certain things that you're going to have to accept too. So, so here's what I'm getting at is those are a lot of different considerations. I guess what I'm saying is I'm a little bit more on I tend to be a little bit more concerned about putting another impact onto that site, not necessarily the specific activity itself, but just another organized thing, because as one of the gentlemen said, we're going to promote it. People are going to come. You're going to have people coming from different places, which is great. We love people visiting our parks. That's what they're there for. But if we have the opportunity to plan thoughtfully, we want to do that as well as we can. So jumping into, I guess, doing something either permanent or semi-permanent at this time, my recommendation to you is that I would prefer to steer away from that. Again, that is not an assignment of my views or my values of the game of pickleball. And hearing that there is a trend in the United States, actually, not just from these folks, but things that I get, professional publications, and I go to conferences where we talk about things related to parks and recreation, and it's a growing activity. It's a popular activity. So we do need to recognize it, kind of like the dog park discussion that's been going on for 8, 9, 10 years. We recognize it. We're trying to find a solution for it. It's just a matter of finding the right place, the fun, whatever it takes to do this the right way. The reason I mentioned the other parks that we have 3 other parks that have tennis courts that are in various conditions, much less good than Rivercrest. I would love to find a way to develop those courts, fix them up, and probably could even talk about dedicating one or more of those courts because of the lack of use in some of those rundown sites, specifically Latourette and Hartkey. They're almost in non-usable. You don't see tennis there because they're not really in a condition to play tennis. I would love to see those improved, and if there is enough of if we believe there's enough justification in doing so, or at least on even on a trial basis or whatever, to see those improved, and potentially those are sites that we could work with these folks and their organization and get some energy into fixing up a place that needs to be fixed up, and also giving them a space, because no matter what, if we do something at Rivercrest, it's still going to only be a shared space, and there's going to be conflicting uses and varying uses. We have the opportunity to look at a couple sites. One in particular that I'm really interested in is Latourette, but others as well that we could consider. Quite frankly, I think we would be. If we focused on figuring out a way to do that. In the meantime, nothing is preventing anybody from simply going up and playing pickleball on any court in this city. But I realize that you're asking for more than just that. So I have more thoughts, but that's kind of, I tried to summarize. I know I spoke a little bit long there, and I apologize, but we've been waiting for a few months to kind of get to the heart of this discussion. So I wanted to share really where kind of my thinking has been the last few months since we've been sort of kicking this around, but not really taking it to this level of discussion. So
Scott,
thanks for indulging.
One of the reasons in our goal discussion that I forgot the number, but we talked about improving certain parks, and I wanted an example of Latourette Park. I was thinking exactly of the pickleball activity, and I don't know how far out that could be. I guess it would be purely a guess to know how long, if that park could ever be upgraded. But in the meantime, I guess they could use temporary markings as long as
Painter's
they're,
tape and.
I don't know how they do that, but
What is the condition at Hartkey Park? And have the pickleball people taken a look at their, is it as bad as Latourette?
Not quite, but it's getting there. It's not
Okay.
good. And the thing about Hartkey also, we would want to think about it. It's kind of literally
no
right in
parking.
almost some people's backyard. It's in a subdivision. One of the
It's
older,
more of a neighborhood park like
Yeah.
Filbert Run
correct.
Park is.
It would be
without
like it would
public parking.
good example. It's an older park, kind of like that, with
Well-
houses right on top of it. So that's why I was kind of steering away from that one in this discussion a little bit. But
But Latourette is also kind of the same way. There's no parking there
well,
besides
you're not
on
backing.
street.
I would say that you're not backing up to anybody's house. The court.
Okay.
But it's kind of its own city block, and there's on-street parking right around it. I mean, definitely we would want to talk. Excuse me. We would want to talk to the neighbors about that, as we would with any improvement. But my sense is improving that would only be probably good for the neighborhood.
What about Hillendale? Behind the jail there. That seems like you've got parking. You've got. We walk that quite often. I hardly ever see anybody playing tennis there. I could be wrong, but we don't have stats on that, do we? As to who?
No, we don't track, but I have enough of a sense of what's used and not used and how it's. Blaine, that's an excellent question and a good point. Hillendale is not in bad condition. It's not in great. It eventually needs to be resurfaced. But the courts are playable. I think they've got a few divots in them and some things like that probably need. We could almost do like a short-term, quick fix-up with some patching, and then eventually we'd want to do that. But I would be open to the idea of exploring converting that to a multi-use kind of a thing where you could overlay the striping on top of the tennis courts, because my sense is that would be well utilized. It'd be much more utilized for pickleball if we turn it into a pickleball court. It's pretty minimally used as a tennis court, and they're not in terrible shape. They're not in great shape.
Well, and you're not in your neighborhood. I mean, you're really kind of out in the middle of the field there. So
That's part of the. I know these folks and some others have spoken to that. The tennis courts are kind of in the interior of the park, a little bit off the beaten path, if you will, but they're still very much accessible. We have two different parking lots, one up and one down, and you can come into the tennis court there from both ways. It may not be as ideal as, Rivercrest is nice because you can pull right in. You can head and park almost at the tennis courts if those spots are open. Sorry, my voice is kind of going.
Could we do golf carts or something that we could?
Something with bikes you could figure out there.
Rickshaw.
So that, but Hillendale would be something that I would be comfortable saying we could do something right now, and I don't think we'd have any kind of a negative or an impact that would cause conflicting uses or overuse of a facility or something like that, because I don't believe it's very well utilized, and the courts there are not in bad condition. They're not great, but so.
Okay, any comments from members?
I'm all for this idea. I mean, I think this is what we want to bring different groups into our city, get things moving like this. If I remember correctly, back at the Parks Day, we had a group from Frisbee Golf that was looking for a place, and which is another national game that draws. From what they told us, big groups there to view these tournaments. So I'm all for it. I hope that we're able to give this group, their 90 days at the Hillendale, if that's possible.
Is that something that motion should be made? Or?
Well, let's ask, have you been to the Hillendale Park? Have you looked at it?
Would you guys, someone or some of you mind if you want to come up? Thanks.
So I haven't been there in a bit, but when I was there, the surface didn't seem so great. So it wasn't as terrible, and Laureate that one is terrible, and the Harkey one is terrible.
Mhm.
You wouldn't run or anything on those surfaces and expect to not be injured.
Agreed.
So this one did seem, like you're saying, mediocre, so you would patch. So what are you proposing? You would patch it in some way or resurface it minimally?
Well, I'm saying that I would think that we could probably look at some short-term, some patching. It would not be anything nearly as good as a complete resurfacing. But I guess what I'm suggesting is we could go out and evaluate. I haven't been over to those courts for a little while. I need to go back and revisit. But the last time I was there, I do remember there's a few chunks in the court, little divots. Those tend to kind of, if the ball hits it, kind of goes a different direction than you want it to. I would investigate what we could do kind of on short term to at least to sort of patch that up with maybe some concrete mix or something that could at least sort of temporarily hold that over. So I'd need to look at that. I'm just suggesting that we might be able to do something short term, and then again looking at that as a long term thing. That wouldn't require nearly as much work as Hillendale or La Tourette and Harkey. Those would be complete renovations, which again I would love to.
La Tourette would be amazing if it was a complete renovation. If it was resurfaced and done for pickleball, it has a terraced area. I mean, there's many
It's
things.
really cool.
It has really possibilities that would be very exciting. And that's for the larger play, to have people come out and really come and see the city and go to the businesses and eat, at Singer Hill and all the things that you can do.
Someone mentioned 401ks and
they can spend it in Oregon City because they're playing at this great thing.
Yeah,
But back to the Hillendale, is that so there was also, when I was there, I was a bit uncomfortable. The noise from the jail was prominent. And so I heard that kind of thing when I was out there playing. It didn't seem, when I was there, just as welcoming as kind of Rivercrest. Obviously, that is our gem of parks that we have. But, I'm understanding what you're saying, and I'm not going to say no to anything that's offered. So if it's possible to have a surface, and in the short term, something can be tried about that, and we can see if people would come. As you mentioned, it's a bit out of the way, it's a bit enclosed, it's a little less accessible. The bathrooms are not. There's no doors on the bathrooms, which is interesting. So, so it's not as user friendly for some of us. But at the
La Tourette has no bathroom at all.
Exactly, I know. But the pool is a bit, and so who knows with the renovation that we're proposing what could be possible. Even a porta potty.
I did have one question on the Rivercrest. Scott, would you be comfortable if, let's say this group went to the neighborhood association and made a presentation, and the neighborhood association came back to us and said, "Oh, let's go. These guys are great." And then would we feel more comfortable saying, "Well, okay, we'll do a 90-day trial and see how things go"?
One part of that would be yes, but another part would be I'd still say, and that's the neighborhood impact concern that was brought to us, has been brought to our attention previously. So on that part, the answer would be yes. I still feel that what these folks are looking for is something to kind of create a home for pickleball in Oregon City.
Okay.
And if that's what our objective is to try to get to, or at least experiment and do some kind of a trial to see how it goes, and things can always be, you can put your toe in the water and then we can kind of keep feeling it out. I still feel like Rivercrest is not the place to do that, because eventually, if that becomes popular, then we're going to take away. We built that for tennis a few years ago. Not to say that tennis is the overriding sport. Maybe tennis's popularity is fading out, and some other sports are getting more popular. That's something we'd have to gauge. But I'm just saying that's what if we built a dog park, and then suddenly we turned it into a skate park. The folks that we built the dog park for would say, "You built this dog park, why'd you turn it into a skate park?" Just because somebody came and said, "We'd rather do this activity, there's a lot of people that want to do it." That's maybe not a great example, but that's what kind of I could just come up with quickly. What I'm saying is, if it's as popular as these folks are saying, and I really do, it is a growing sport. I'm aware of some of the statistics of it. I'm concerned that we're still going to have a conflict there, and that we're taking out of service eventually are only 2 tennis courts that are
good
that are in really good shape. Whereas we could focus on something and grow this idea if it grows, and work in a kind of a relationship partnership thing where we develop some courts that don't have much use at all and improve something, and then actually there would be probably minimal to no conflict for this type of use, and they could do events and bring people in, and there wouldn't be other folks that say, hey, but I was coming to play tennis and you took over my court or whatever.
Can I make a suggestion? Oh, sorry.
Mr. Chair, in an effort to move this forward,
Good.
I will kind of propose some of the things that I think we should do. One, I don't think we need to make a motion on anything right now. Two, I think we need to let staff give them formal approval for a temporary use to be 90 days or through the summer. I don't really care. Three, I was here when that neighborhood association came and said, please stop bringing more things. So I think Rivercrest needs to go off the table as a permanent solution. Four, I think we need to focus on Ladderette Park as a final destination, and we got one city commissioner here, staff member, let's start focusing on getting the funds to put that in place. I mean, at the beginning, it could be a resurfacing. Asphalt isn't that expensive in the big picture, if we can keep bathrooms off the table. But I think that's the direction we need to head.
Okay, that's just a comment, not a motion, right?
Yeah, I don't think we need one.
Okay.
No, I mean,
Dan, you had a
actually,
comment?
it's like we're twins. I don't know. It just makes. I mean, it's basically. I mean, if it sounds. Only other thing I'd add is maybe we want to put this back on the agenda for May, just so you have time to go look at Hillendale and do the assessment about what it's going to take to do the resurfacing, so we can re-answer it. But with this thing that we're looking at doing 90 days, I agree with the rest of what you said. Because I think we need to get you an answer. We also want this to happen in Oregon State. I mean, we get that feeling from the group, and then long term looking at Ladderette and finding a solution for that, but understanding that's not going to happen within the next 90 days, or any time even close to that. So,
no, I'm motivated. I'm
Yeah.
serious. We've got a parks budget with little pots for when HVACs go bad, and the HVAC at Ladderette Park just went bad. And Hal's Asphalt down the street has probably got a crew in 3 weeks that's not scheduled yet.
Yeah, how much is it going to cost to patch up Hillendale? And then you got to pay money to take care of.
Ladderette anyway.
Yeah. So why not just go for that? I mean,
I can tell you at Wilsonville.
Hold on. We have to have any comments have to be made at the dais. I'm sorry, just because of recording purposes.
Please wait. You can call them.
Wilsonville, the bid was let, and they're doing the work right now. It's 2 tennis courts, and it's $21,000, and they were in excellent condition, and they just wanted to change the color, so it takes a minimum. It's ridiculous to assume that you could just bring in some asphalt and spread it around. There's a multi-layered technique, and you use epoxy-based polymers. It's not just scatter some asphalt like you were going to do your driveway. It's an expensive process. If it in very good condition, it's about $6,000 or $7,000 to do a small tennis court. I can tell you, I was a contractor for 21 years. Ladderette Park is just as a scratch. It might as well be a dirt pile. You're going to start all over. You're going to put concrete down, put lots of rebar in it so it doesn't crack and break up and waste your money.
Okay,
I would,
thank you.
if I could, real quick, let's urge caution here. I don't want to get into cost estimating and saying it is or isn't going to be a certain amount of money in different facilities. We haven't had the opportunity to evaluate that. The very kind of simple, quick fixes that I was talking about, I would need to analyze Hillendale courts with my maintenance staff, see what we're looking at for sure. I probably would invite these folks to come out and meet me and walk around, and we'd look together and identify, can we just do a quick concrete patch that my staff could do on an off day. Well, there aren't any off days, but on a day that we could squeeze in and do a little, or you know, I'm talking about a really, really short term, quick, simple, inexpensive fix there. I absolutely agree. Is it Tim? Tom. Tom, I absolutely agree with you that we when we're thinking of the long-term solution of renovating these courts that are in really bad shape, the Rivercrest courts that we did, and that includes the basketball court and 2 tennis courts, were in pretty bad condition. And to do the whole thing, we brought it all the way down, and you have to basically regrade it, depending on how much damage and how deep you have to go. But it was probably close to $50,000 to do those courts, I believe. That might have included some other ancillary things in the park, but I'm thinking we did about a $50,000 grant that we paid a little bit of, but the state paid some of through a grant to redo those courts. So if we're talking about the long-term plan, then we're focusing on a pretty significant improvement. And my hope too was not just that the city would be involved, but maybe you guys have ways of doing fundraising, or through the national organization, maybe there's grants that they rehabilitate courts. I know that the U.S. Tennis Association puts grants towards rehabilitating old tennis courts because they want to see those turned into playable courts. And I don't know if I'm just throwing that out, that maybe there's a way we can partner. But I think the first step is just saying, can we do a short-term thing, try it out. I think Hillendale is probably where I will go out and in the next few weeks here and look at it a little bit further, and I'll invite these folks to come over with me, and we can say, here's what we might need to do to make this kind of playable in the immediate future. You can put some temporary lines all over those courts, because I don't think anybody is going to squawk at us about how come there's some weird lines on our tennis courts. I just don't think there's enough play there that we're going to hear much feedback that way. That's an easy solution that we could probably work towards right now, and then let them try that temporary thing out, see how it goes maybe over the summer, and then kind of report back, and then start investigating one of these other facilities that needs to be rehabbed, and thinking about the significant investment then that's going to have to be made. But we do have some opportunities for what could almost become like a dedicated pickleball court facility, which I think it might be ultimately what you'd be looking at if it proves to be as popular as what you're talking about. So does that sound like a solution that
Sounds
the committee's
good.
good with? And
Perfect.
I'll investigate that, and I'll have something to report back to you next month about what we think as far as those specific courts at Hillendale, and then we might even start kind of getting moving forward on this if it looks like we can get going.
But will you
Sounds
be
good.
taking, if I might, will you be taking a look at the Hillendale site as possibly the short-term solution
That's what I'm
too?
suggesting.
Not only them striping the river court with their temporary striping, but actually within this
That is what
season.
I'm suggesting. I'm recommending that we focus on Hillendale
Okay.
as the temporary trial location. If we can consider it playable, then that's what I'm suggesting. I'm not recommending that we do the temporary striping at Rivercrest. I'm not going to go out and tell anybody to stop playing pickleball in those courts if somebody shows up and does so, as long as they don't do any permanent changes to anything. I'm not going to tell anybody to stop playing, but I'm saying to work cooperatively towards something. That's what I'm suggesting is Hillendale.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Okay,
Any other comments?
great.
Okay,
Thank you.
well, thank you very much, and we will talk more about this later, I'm sure. Thank you. Let's move on to report on department funding.
And if I may, real quickly, I read that Oregonian article. And you all should read it. I highly recommend it. I read it just from a park standpoint, maintenance budgets. I knew we had. I wouldn't even think in pickleball, and it was quite an interesting article.
Thank you.
Fortunately, Portland Parks are making the press, not ours.
Yeah.
I apologize. I have a scratchy throat. In lieu of, or in consideration of our time here, I'm gonna abbreviate my discussion that I was gonna have here on this budget thing, even more so. And what I'd like to do is just really quickly give you some info, and I've got some takeaway stuff for you to take home. and then allow you to follow up with any questions that you may have, or bring it back at another meeting to delve into any issues a little bit further. So what this is a one of the members, I think, or one or more of the members said, could we get a report from staff about basically just kind of how the department is funded, because and I think it's an excellent point that we haven't really talked greatly about the budgetary stuff, and so just to what I'm trying to do here, just to understand this, is that just to give you a snapshot, understanding that the budget stuff is pretty complex and there's a lot to it, and there's a lot more to it than I'm able to share here in just a few minutes, but I think this is kind of a starting point. And then, as I said, follow-up questions, even meeting individually with anybody if you wanted to go through the budget and understand it further. So what I would recommend is I've just taken some copies of a few of the pages in our budget book that pertain just to parks and recreation and community services. The budget is online on our city website. Anybody that has a interest in delving further into it, I would recommend you go there. If you go to the city's webpage, you go under the finance department, there is the budget for the last several budgets are on there. What I am looking at, and what you're looking at, and what I pulled out is the proposed 2015 to 17 budget. And I did this one because simply this is the most recent information. So like last year's, the current year's budget is in there and contained in there. What I encourage you to do is, if you're really interested, is go on to the 2015-17 budget. I didn't print this part out, and read the budget message that the city manager writes. It is excellent. It is concise. In about 9 or 10 pages, it gives you the story, the narrative story of the city's budget, which is hundreds of pages long. So, real quickly, as a couple of kind of key points here, the city now operates on a 2-year budget cycle. We adopted that. The city commission adopted that in the current this current fiscal cycle that we're in. Is the first time the city's done a 2-year budget. It had always been on 1-year cycles. You're allowed to do 2-year budgets in Oregon, and it takes more planning and forecasting and preparation, but it saves significant staff time and resources in putting together a 2-year budget, because you don't have to do basically a full budget preparation every year. So we are the current budget calendar that we're in is the 2013-15. We go and as a reminder, we go on a fiscal calendar, not an annual calendar. So we go July 1 to June 30th is our budget year, and that covers two years. So the proposed 2015-17 budget is what I've pulled the snapshot out of. This is not adopted yet, but it has, as of last week, it was presented to the city's budget committee, and it was approved at that, and now the city commission has to adopt that, and will do so in June. That's typically how that works. The budget committee is the 5 city commissioners plus 5 citizen appointees. You have to have by Oregon law. You have to have the equal number of citizen appointees on your budget committee as you do elected board members. So in our case, that makes 10 people. The budget committee reviews and recommends or adopts the budget, and then once that's done, the governing body, which is our city commission, can only change that by certain percentage amounts or by actual certain dollar amounts. So you have a question, Sean?
Yeah. I just wanted to get into the nuts and bolts real quick.
Yep.
Since it was germane to the last topic, just see capital outlay. Can you kind of talk about some of those pieces to give a feeling of what sort of funds are sitting there and what they're already possibly earmarked for?
So real quickly, let me just, I'll get to that, Sean, in just a couple seconds here. But so on the front page, you've got the kind of the organizational chart to remind you these are the different divisions within our department that are funded, and that's how the budget kind of follows. So you've got kind of an overview page, and I'm just going flipping through this page by page. So on the bottom, and these are the budget book numbers, page 64 starts with the individual division, so that's Parks and Cemetery. And then you've got the pool, recreation, Pioneer Center, and I'm probably forgetting something, just general administration stuff. So those are the major division areas within each of those. And then what you're asking about is we actually have capital in different places. So
Parks and cemetery maintenance expenditures.
that's correct. So we identify some capital projects in there. But before I talk about that, I also want to mention on the very last page it says, the top says Public Works System Development. That's just because it's folded into a different budget, but it's Park System Development. That's the majority of our parks development stuff, and that kind of tends to be what PRAC mostly has focused on. Typically, PRAC hasn't gotten that involved in sort of operational day-to-day stuff. I don't think you want to know how many staples I buy and how many pieces of paper I buy and stuff like that, but you kind of tend to focus more on projects, which is what you're asking about, Sean. So the system development charge is a fee that is charged on any new development, either residential or commercial. We charge this for parks, streets, sewer, water, different things. Those are all collected, and the parks one is identified right here. And as you can see, the bottom, kind of the very bottom right, in the proposed for the 2-year budget, we have an SDC budget, which is our parks development budget, of about $3.7 million that are available. Now, the budget book doesn't give an exact breakdown by line item. I could go over that with you in more detail with some worksheets that we have where we actually spell out projects. We've kind of got this basically lumped into some bigger categories like land purchase, project development, and some things like that. And that's probably what we could get into with some further discussion. Is that goes back to that identifying what are we going to do for development. And we're going to develop Glen Oak Park, are we going to develop Wesley Lynn Park, or are we going to look at some other things? But there are funds that are identified, and they're in the right categories where we can utilize those, and we list those as potential projects. Our operating budget, besides the SDCs that I was just talking about, that's basically, we are mostly funded by the general fund, which is sort of the most widely used general city budget, and that includes revenue that comes in from property taxes, fees that are charged, like we charge admission fees at the pool, or program charges or things like that in our department. Other special types of revenues that are collected, and some of that stuff. So the majority of our operating is coming from the city's general fund, and then we have our SDC fund, which is dedicated and may only be used for parks development, and that may not be used for any operations, including maintenance or any other such thing. It can only be for basically building new things, and within. So then, getting I think to the kind of the heart of what you were talking about, Sean, within our parks and cemetery budget. So on page 63, there's a capital outlay at the bottom of that. Of $313,100 for the let's see, proposed, but for
I'm
the
actually looking at 65, but
okay.
65.
Yeah, 65.
I think one.
That's what I meant to
deeper.
say.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. What did I say? 63 or something?
Yeah.
I meant 65 because that's what I'm looking at too. Let me just. So I'm trying to make this as kind of succinct as possible, but those are things that are not in our SDCs or not SDC eligible, but those are in our operating budget. Those are for smaller projects, like maybe a playground replacement. For example, we do have in this budget to replace the playground at Barkley Hills Park in the coming budget cycle. But the majority of that $313,000, you recall that we talked about, I mentioned to the Parks Committee that while we have been looking at the possibility of eventually, hopefully, doing a park utility fee of some type, there's a revenue source that became available that the city manager supported and recommended and brought to the Budget Committee and the City Commission, which is some right-of-way fees from some new agreements, franchise agreements from utility customers, like I believe mostly from PGE and I think from the gas company. So there are some new revenues that became available that the city manager recommended in the budget going forward, that we take $200,000 per year and put it towards parks deferred maintenance. A portion of that is going to fund one new full-time park maintenance position, so we're going to carve that amount out, and the remainder, which is about $120,000 per each of the 2 years, which is where I don't know if the numbers are a little off there, because there's also a couple other smaller projects put in there. So we are determining then from all that deferred maintenance where to apply these funds. So that's different than our Parks Development Fund, which is the SDCs. I'm sorry, this is a little bit of a scam. I'm kind of jumping back and forth a little bit here, but so we've got capital money in our parks maintenance budget, and then we've got our major capital is our parks SDCs, which again is the last page on your worksheet there, and that is again we can drill down on this further, and again I'd be happy to meet individually with people if you want to go through this and kind of talk about like what's in different line items or that kind of thing, or if the entire committee wants to go through this in further depth. But I didn't know how much in depth you wanted to get. I was just kind of responding to the question that was brought to me at the last meeting to give you at least a sort of a snapshot. So that's kind of a hurried way of describing that. I felt a little bit like I was rushing through that because we had a longer discussion than I expected. So I kind of want to let you ask me any questions or tell me what further you want to know.
To me, I think, the budget issue is really foundational for us as committee members to understand, because that informs our decisions and prioritizing of various projects. So I would be willing, if you ever wanted to do a special session, give us some homework assignments or something. I'd be willing to do that to get more up to speed. So
appreciate that.
Other questions regarding the budget?
I don't think my question was answered. So I see that capital outlay on page 65 is
313 all the way to the right.
Yeah, through 13.
Well, I'm looking for the next. Yeah. So based on this 200,000 from the commission, and I see $17,000 for a dark fiber I'm not familiar with, 45 for playground equipment, 11,000. So are those the three components that are currently identified, and you have other capital funds available for other deferred maintenance that's yet to be identified? Because that's my assumption, because you only spelled out three here.
Okay, great. I understand you now. Sorry, Sean. So the dark fiber is a city network connection issue. Just real quickly, we are putting. So the city has its own fiber network, which links to to all of our files and our basically our whole network system. The Parks and Cemetery office is currently not on that. We have to do that through a third-party provider. It's expensive and it's slow and it's inefficient. And the same with the swimming pool. So we're taking both of those and putting them on. So you'll see the same thing at the pool in their capital outlay budget. So that's what that is, and that's just coming from the general fund. It was a special request that we made to get that. It'll save the city quite a bit of money in the long run. The playground replacement project, we requested that specifically, and that's not coming from the SDCs. You can't pay for replacement items out of SDC, so that was a special request. And then the unspecified amount, which is the bigger amount that you're referring to, that gets back to, so we've been allocated $200,000 per each of the 2 years to do we did not spell out, okay, we're going to do exactly these projects. We provided a list of deferred maintenance items that we've talked about, and I can provide that list. I think I have provided it to the committee before, to use our discretion as to prioritization of deferred maintenance items. Now, that is certainly something that PRAC can look at that with staff and give your recommendation. That doesn't mean it's absolutely what is going to happen, but your input is valued and it's often utilized. So a lot of that capital money in the park and cemetery maintenance is not specifically is not line itemed out project by project, but rather the understanding was we would use it to address these deferred maintenance needs, which the list is like 75 projects long, and we're going to just basically try to start chipping off some of those projects. This doesn't solve the $200,000 a year doesn't solve that problem, but it does help us, and we're going to start working on it. So that might be what you're more kind of thinking and focusing on. We could, and Lauderette Park is on the deferred maintenance list, for example, as are many other park projects. And so, where do we prioritize those funds? And that's something that we're going to be deciding over the next basically couple of months or so, and then start working to address those. Is that more clear?
Yeah, that's where I was going at.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what you're asking, but
I guess a lot of times they're spelled out more in depth. This
Yes.
was new funds I wasn't familiar with, and so just
this one's different because it's a new source of funding from a new revenue source that we have not previously received, and we've basically been given this in our budget to go and begin to address some of our deferred maintenance items.
Scott, is that list readily accessible?
Yes.
I'd like to have a look at it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to email. I could just email that to you, and then we could also have more discussion at the next meeting if you'd like.
And then a quick follow-up, probably a yes or no, is would a change in capacity or a park that has zero use going to a large use for a pickleball users constitute STCs?
Maybe. It's not quite yes or no. It's kind
Could
of
you
maybe,
stretch it?
possibly.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Yeah. It's a bit of a stretch, but it's not an absolute no. If you're increasing the capacity and the use, and can prove that, then it's pretty specified under state law. So it's not quite yes or no. It's we'd have to evaluate that. I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Anything else on the funding item?
I think were you saying something, Blaine?
Well, related, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to comment that if you're interested in budget issues, the Oregon City Business Alliance this coming Tuesday at 11:30 to 1 o'clock for luncheon, we've invited Wyatt Parno, who's the city's budget manager, to come and give a presentation on how it works and how it impacts Oregon City. So just give that plug and let me know if you want to attend.
Thank you. Anything else?
Can I just, in conclusion for you, a couple things. I'm going to resend you, and it'll be kind of actually a little bit more updated version of the deferred maintenance list that we've been accumulating. And then also, somebody said if there was some homework that we could do or an assignment or something, I would strongly encourage, So Blaine, your homework, because Dustin just pointed at you for me to take.
I'm not accepting homework at this time.
If you really want to get a better, I had to kind of jump around here, and this is not a very good description of the budget. It was kind of a quick hit on it. Is go to the city website, pop onto that budget document. It'll open up a pretty large PDF file on your computer, so be aware of that. And the most recent one, this proposed 2015-17, if you read the budget message in the first about 10 pages of that, will be an excellent kind of synopsis of the whole city budget, a little bit more about sort of how it works and what some of the big projects are. And then, of course, you can jump into different things from there. But it's a really good, fast way to read like a 300-page document in about 9 pages, kind of like an executive summary, if you will. And I would recommend that if you have the time, and it might put you to sleep, but maybe not. So, thanks.
Okay, let's move on. Item 5H, other general business. Any other business to bring before the committee?
Is that fine?
Scott?
5H.
Got one thing for the committee. Your Park Day event, which I believe, based on some previous discussions, we're going to continue to do. We need to pin down a date for that pretty soon, probably before the next meeting of this committee, in order to get into the summer trail news to get that advertised. What we did last year, of course, is we did that at one of the movie nights, which is basically every Friday night in August. So we've got 4 movie nights starting on August 7th, and every 4 Fridays including that one. I don't have, last year we had a list of the movies to talk about before we decided which date. I don't have that for you because we're doing that online voting, and that doesn't close, I think, until May 31st. So we're going to be a little behind on, so I apologize that it's a little bit different, but I wanted to encourage you to pick a date, and if you want to do that tonight, or if you want me to send out an email, and we could do that kind of sort of by email, so that we can get it effectively advertised in the Trail News.
I would be an advocate for just doing the first one. You know, it's still summer. We're still trying to get the message out, and the further we push it towards the fall, you lose some of that benefit. And also, some of us tend to get more committed as you get closer to school starting.
And school will be starting in August, so the movies will be going on. You know,
That's right.
School has started.
So that would be August 7th.
August 7th
would be the first movie.
My recommendation. That's what I would like to do.
Okay, how about August 7th? Everybody okay with that?
Right. I would just have one request. I mean, you haven't selected the movies, but once you select the movies, you can figure out where they go.
Yeah.
I would like to see one movie that's really a family movie. Last summer, and it was fine, but there was one of the movies was not a family movie. I mean, adults would go to it.
Okay.
That was.
Well, the movies are already online.
No, I'm just talking about when you schedule those movies.
Well, they're scheduled. So I'm looking at our website right now. So, for example, just real quickly, August 7th we have 4 movie choices, and they're specific. And the winner of that week will be picked for that week.
Oh, I see.
And then August 14th we have 4 different choices. So they're assigned to. They're already kind of pre-assigned with the winner of each.
Never mind.
If you peek at the results so far, does it tell you? Can you vote and get a current result?
It won't tell me that. I could get that from our staff, but I wouldn't be able to get it tonight.
What are the 4 movies
Yeah,
for
what are
the
4 movies?
seventh?
For the first night?
Yeah.
Big Hero 6, Space Jam, The Giver, and Edge of Tomorrow.
So Big Hero 6.
The Big Hero 6, yeah.
I have a feeling that might be.
Which would be a good movie
That'd be a good one.
for what we're looking for.
What was the name?
Big Hero 6, it's a
Big Hero 6.
cartoon,
Oh.
big family movie.
Yeah, it's a pretty new.
It's right up Doug's alley.
Yeah.
It's a fairly new, fairly recent to video animated movie that did really well at the box office. I think so. I think if that's the one that gets selected, which I'd say is pretty good, that would be.
It's that complicated. Never mind.
Yeah, but
To do the first one. Yeah.
August 7th will be the night we've chosen.
so I just need we can talk about planning details later. I just needed to get a date pinned down so I could make sure we get it advertised, and so everybody's good with the 7th.
We take a chance on the movie.
Great. Thank you very much.
Is it at the same
Okay, other general business.
park again, or?
Hellendale.
Anything else, other general business? Then let's move on to PrAC member reports. And Sean, start with you, please.
I have 2 quick things written down. One, in the near future, Scott, the Cove will start seeing some changes, and since PrAC has responsibility for some significant components through there, I would just like the group kept up to date as to impacts or changes or mitigation, those sorts of things, if you can.
I'll give you an update on that.
And the second thing is we don't normally get involved in much with maintenance, but we have some really good-looking park signs in the city that can't last 10 years. And so I would like to just bring that up as a point of kind of conversation that when we build some of these new parks, we need to do something different because a sign should last more than 10 years. When Wesley Lynn's park sign was built in 2005 or 6, and yet it's terrible. It looks like it needs to be completely repainted and done. And that same sign was adopted throughout the city. So I think that was even above you because they put them for neighborhoods and everything. But that's something that needs to change.
So park sign,
Like the-
style development kind of thing.
Quality, you know, I mean, we put a sign up that should last for 30 years. We don't have, and if they're being paid out of SDCs, we've got money to put up a good sign day one, but we don't have money 10 years later to fix the sign.
You're right.
So.
Okay, Dustin.
Nothing.
So that's kind of a future meeting item. Is that what you're
No,
asking?
not, I mean,
or-
just more of
Or
a
are you just saying-
group observation.
thinking about it?
that-
Okay.
that normally we don't get involved in that, but I wanted to bring it out
I hear you.
publicly.
Consider. Okay.
Lane?
Oh, maybe a future item, but on the issue of maintenance, it'd be interesting to explore, a concept, and maybe it's been tried before, but something like an adopt a park, where we have a lot of service organizations, Rotary, Lions, and so forth, and maybe those clubs would adopt a park and help do maintenance on that. Also, churches and even businesses, maybe Benchmade Knife would take on a park, and Hill and Dale or whatever, and that would be theirs, and they could carve out a little bit in their budget to help out. But I'm just saying, tapping into the private, and it'd be interesting to explore that. And so that's
Great idea.
Doug. I'll be last.
I just want to say that last Saturday at the City Cleanup Day, thank you, Doug Neely, for doing your part in Abernethy Creek Park. That was your choice of park? And I know William and I participated in the cleanup at the Holcomb Road entrance up to the Park Place neighborhood. Pulled a lot of weeds, planted a lot of flowers. Looking forward to beautifying our city. I think everybody should have been there. Sorry I didn't see anybody else, but if you do that next year, if you show up and bring a couple cans of food for the food bank, you get a raffle ticket, and you go back down after you do 3 hours of labor, and they feed you lunch, and there's a raffle drawing. I won 2 beautiful hanging baskets. So beautify your own house at the same time, and just keep your eyes open for things that we can do, just the little things that we can do to make our city beautiful.
I would just say the activity I was engaged in at that particular park, I believe, is the reason that I'm coughing.
That's pulling ivy down that park, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roger.
Yes, I just want to say that I know I had a dirty face that day too, and so did Scott. So,
Which area did
I was
you?
with you.
Yeah, of course you were. You had your wheelbarrow. I was planting flowers on one side, and you were pulling weeds on the other. But you also had lunch with us. Yes.
I was at a different site, not with you guys, but I did participate.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Okay, I have some items to report from the Oregon City Pioneer Center. One is new staff training is going well, and they are getting the hang of it and their new jobs, duties. I'm assuming that's the program assistant and van driver. Second is March for Meals has concluded, and we'll be finalizing our account for donations soon. 3, building rentals are increasing, which in turn increases wear and tear on the building. Maintenance has been very helpful in keeping up on any issues that arise. 4, a new class will be offered for terrarium building. 5, the defense class was full and went very well. And 6, our newsletter has been reformatted to be more streamlined and clear. And I brought in a proposal which kind of, I don't know if that goes along with what you were talking about, bringing people together, Blaine. And I brought in a proposal to form a Oregon City Parks Foundation, a public-private entity. So I don't know if I need to read that here or how to present this. I don't know if you've already read it and that can ask me questions, or you want me to read through it, or if it's getting late. But Bob, is that?
Well, I don't know about reading that, but why don't you give us what are your general ideas here?
Well, okay, so it'd be obviously a private-public partnership with the Oregon City Parks Recreation Advisory Committee and the Oregon City Parks Maintenance. And this group could offer, I have some things written down here. It would put out a call, well, let's see, sorry. It would create a resource for funds which the city may not be able to access right now through the private funding part. And it would provide an avenue for volunteering in the parks, and for people with different skill sets, just that this could be, through this foundation could be sent to different places, and there were through some of the links I put on here, you'll see that some of them have training. They provide training for the different volunteer issues, and 3, it would create avenues to involve adult, teens, schools, and our city parks. And I think this, I'm not sure, but my wife was a counselor over in Westland, and she said that the schools have programs where that might include outdoor schools in the parks, and cleaning and working in the parks, doing studies. And we've already talked about this at, some of the meetings for the future parks. I think it was Hazeldale where they can go in and research the water area there, and so I guess I just wanted to bring this in to maybe have you study, and I was hoping maybe, I didn't know if I could get some feedback on whether anybody had any thoughts on this. I don't know right now, after the turnout on Saturday, I think, was there maybe 50 people there? I don't know. That maybe this would be something that would help that day, and it would help invigorate Park Day, and it would just be another identity that would be there for the parks, and to do some cleanup and beautification of the parks. There's just so many things that can be done with it right now. And what I was hoping to do after this meeting was to try to get some people together in the city, business people, just to try to get a very good selection of people together, and start putting it together and come back to the PRAC and give you more information on it. And because I myself feel that I'm being a facilitator of this, and I think there's probably, I know there's people that have more experience than I do that could help put this together and get it going. And it could be a big benefit to the city.
Well, I can say if we found individuals who would, foundation, of course, is where you have sizable sums of money donated, and then those funds are managed, and typically you use the income from that each year to fund whatever projects the foundation decides to spend that on. But I know for the Lions Sight and Hearing Foundation, there were 2 individuals that passed away. Each of them put in about $400,000 each. That has been going for like 25 or 30 years. It's up in the millions of dollars now, and they've used that. It's an incredible tool to use, but you need the initial seed funding, and of course organizing the foundation itself, and so it's a big deal. But if it could work, it would be a powerful thing for the city.
Any other comments or questions? I have a question. Does this committee have the authority to establish such a foundation? Do you know the answer to that, Scott? Or would they have to be approved by the city commission?
Yeah, if it was a partnership, it would have to be, ultimately, it'd have to be approved by the commission. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think what Roger's trying to do is just kind of flesh out the idea of whether PRAC thinks it's something that we should explore, think about, refine the idea, maybe come with some different thoughts about that. I don't want to speak for you, but no, Roger's been talking to me about this and wanted to know if he could bring it up tonight, and I encouraged him to kind of lay it out and say what his idea was.
My oratory skills aren't very good. I'm sorry. But I think I have, I come up with some ideas and try to get them out there and see how they.
It'd be great to see.
It sounded like there were 2 things in there. One was a fundraising thing, but the other one was a volunteer coordinating piece. And I think the latter is. I think foundations are, you really need a professional there to work with you in sometimes, but I think in terms of a voluntary coordinating committee, I think it'd be great.
I guess my question is kind of goes back to Blaine. You just reported and said, hey, what about, thinking about an adopted parks program? Is this something that ties together, in this kind of, maybe we have a conversation at a future meeting where we sort of bring this back around and everybody can digest it until then and see sort of what bubbles out. Is this worth?
Follow Roger's links and
Yeah.
you know, study it a bit more.
Well, there's those friends groups. Look at the library, Friends of the Library. So I think just a general topic on the agenda would be a great idea. This is totally new to me. So I guess my feedback for you is outstanding work for bringing this up and kind of surprising me with something I haven't heard of. I just said 2 nights ago at a meeting how I appreciate you on this committee because you bring so much information to it. Yeah. So that's my feedback.
Okay.
You've challenged me to kind of go look at it. I've never even thought about this before. It's totally new. I'm not prepared to give an opinion. It's just.
Well, I invite. I'm going to be inviting people to a meeting, and I do hope that I'll be able to invite all of you if you have time to stop in at the meeting and see what it's all about, and hopefully we can have a turnout and get something going.
It would be great too to have an example, maybe 1 or 2 examples of other where this has been done at other cities.
The links are at the bottom of that.
Okay.
And in fact, one of the links is the group that is the Highline Park, Friends of the Highline Park, and that was built by one of the 3 finalists that are working, are in line for the Falls project. So.
Okay, then you'll be doing some more work and bringing back more information. Then we'll have a chance to peruse this and have a discussion later on. See where it might go. Okay, what's next here? Oh,
I'm good.
Dan.
I'm good.
You're good. Okay, I had a couple of quick things. They're getting quicker as time marches on. I came into the office the week after our mayor gave his report, State of the City report, and I was thinking, wow, I'd like to know what, if there's a written piece that I could read to know what is on the agenda. So I came into the office out here, and they said I had to sign a Freedom of Information request to get a written presentation. So I thanked them and left. Just for what that's worth. Now, I don't know what that's all about.
I think that's a public records request, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you identify yourself as a?
Well, I'm a citizen. I said I'm an Oregon City citizen.
What is it you requested exactly?
I requested. My question was: is there a written summary of the mayor's remarks to the group where he gave his State of the Oregon City report? The answer was yes, there is. I said, well, may I have a copy? And she excused herself and came back with a form. Said, sign this form, and it'll take 2 or 3 days if it's approved. It was the Freedom of Information request. So I was very surprised by that.
That doesn't sound right.
Is that, you said the State of the City?
It's a report the mayor gave.
Yeah, the State of the City.
Yeah.
At the State of the, because you can watch that online.
Okay.
Is that, it was recorded.
Yeah, I don't.
You have to have Willamette Falls.
Yeah, it might be posted to the website, or it's going to be.
Yeah, so I thought it was going to be posted on the website. You could listen to that.
Bob, I'm not trying to give any opinion or anything. I'm just wanted to clarify something. That's a standard the city needs to do for record keeping. To it's a records request for public records. If the record request is simple and can be done in a matter of minutes, typically there's no cost or anything. You just receive that information, but it has to be documented as a request for records. If it's an extravagant request that requires a lot of copies be made and also maybe a lot of staff research time, there's some charges to that for spending, just because sometimes people maybe take advantage of that. But if it's a simple request like what you just suggested, typically that's probably not going to be a charge. Okay. Not going to be anything charged. It's just a consistency in the process. But you would have probably received that one pretty quickly, I would have guessed.
Okay.
That's not a big deal. And
well,
and also, like I said, I think it exists out there. There's a video that I think is going to be on the city's website pretty soon, if it's not already. But if you want, want to get a hold of that, you can also just email me, and I can help you out with that. That's not a big deal.
If the form has a spot for a social security number, don't.
Well, I asked first if there was a written paper, and the answer was yes, as well may I have a copy. Anyway, enough on that topic. I went to the Rivercrest, the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting, the last one they had, and there was a letter to the committee from some dog fanciers that wanted to use Rivercrest Park for the off-leash park area. And the response wasn't no, it was HELL no. And we've had enough. We have more activities now than we can handle. Anyway, I didn't want to say that earlier, but I was thinking of that reaction, what they might think about new activities like pickleball. Anyway, those are my comments. Anything else to bring before the committee? Then we are adjourned at